Okay, and we are live.
All right. Welcome, everybody. It's Friday, February 14th, House Energy and Digital Infrastructure Committee, and we are here today to take some testimony from the Attorney General's office on H11. We'll introduce ourselves and then turn it over to you. I'm Representative Kathleen James from Bennington 4.
Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Bennington.
Michael Southwood, Caledonia 2.
Victor Howland, Rutland 4.
Dara Torrey, Washington 2.
Greg Putner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Laura Spillier, Wyndham 2.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
And our guests.
Matt Coda, Meadow Hill on behalf of Coda.
Gwen Zaka on behalf of BCBB.
All righty.
Great. And I'm, for the record, Todd Delos, Assistant Attorney General in Shirley Clark's office, the Attorney General's office. So very quickly, I would say in looking at both the work this committee does and what H11 attempts to address, we fully support the importance of broadband in Vermont. We believe that the extension of broadband, I had the opportunity to listen to Christine Hawkins' testimony yesterday. We've met with that group along with others, really understand how valuable it is in a rural state as a reference point, because it still surprises me. I grew up in Glover for the first part of my life and grew up on a party line, which seems almost impossible to my children when like the whole world exists in a tiny little device in our pockets now. And I had to juggle with parents who got to make phone calls. So I share that only as we look at how digital infrastructure is advancing and we truly believe in and support that work. And also not only as an engine of economic development and connectivity, but safety as well. We also recognize that the build out of broadband is a significant public investment. There are a lot of public dollars going into this work, federal and state, and it's really important to manage the public fisc responsibly. The role of the AG's office, I'm sure this committee has heard from the AG's office in the past, but contrary to a lot of popular opinion, though the AG is the top cop in the state, some of the most important work we do and the most impactful work is in the consumer protection space. I know the committee walked through or understands Title IX, Chapter 63, which is the Consumer Protection Act. That's a major part of our work. That's the kind of work when we go after mega corporations for unfair, deceptive practices in the marketplace, like Google, like can't remember who's Meta and who's Alphabet, but Amazon and the other folks. It is often the UDAP, Unfair Deceptive Acts and Practices statute that we use. We have a consumer assistance project that is housed at the University of Vermont. It's a very unique joint project between the AG's office and UVM, brings in a lot of students. And that's the space where most of our consumer complaints are filtered to, and is an opportunity both to work on non-litigation resolution, so mediated resolution for consumer complaints, working with businesses. Small businesses also can use CAP to help mediate complaints with suppliers and otherwise. They operate as consumers in that space. And germane to this bill, we also work with Department of Public Service. When we get complaints regarding regulated entities, including broadband service, I use that broadly. We pass those over generally to the CAPI project at the Department of Public Safety Service. And we often get referrals back from them in certain instances, and I'll get into that a little bit later. All that by way of introduction, I would say at this point, we do not support H11 as it is drafted. And I'll go into the main reasons that is the case. The first is that, at least from where we sit at the AG's office, it is not clear what the scope and scale of the problem that H11 is meant to address is. We are aware of consumer complaints generally in this space, but it is not one of the major complaints we get at CAP, and has not been a major focus of the AG's office, precisely because we aren't hearing a lot of direct concerns from consumers. I know you heard from the Department of Public Service. They have the numbers on what they're hearing in that space, but from our perspective, this is not a major area of consumer complaint. That leads sort of the second point, which is it does seem as though this kind of work, which again, we understand the importance of regulating this space. Yes.
I'm sorry, I do want to interrupt you quickly.
Anytime.
The CAPI division, you said?
Sorry, that's
No.
the Department of Public Services.
Thank you.
It's tricky. Ours doesn't have the I.
Okay,
Ours is cap and
okay,
theirs is cappy.
okay, thank you.
No, that's a very important clarification.
Okay,
And of course, it's your committee, so interrupt us. Me at any point.
okay,
So the second piece is that we do see the department as being a better avenue for this regulation. We see them as having a relationship with the majority of these providers, and that's part of the reason a lot of the informal, for lack of a better term, dispute resolution for consumers is about connections with companies. So at CAP, our program, we have connections with a lot of entities and are able to help resolve disputes for consumers precisely because we know who to pick up the phone and call, how to kind of navigate some of these pathways that are hard for your average consumer to do. But because we have a volume of work with a given entity, we're a little faster now. That said, part of the reason we turn our CAP complaints in this space over to the Department of Public Service is because they have those relationships with the regulated entities, which are very frequently the broadband providers. So they can get on the phone, make the call and help resolve it. I think the testimony yesterday from Director Thompson used the phrase something like soft authority or soft power or something like that, which I interpret to mean that kind of relational ability to get some resolution for folks. We don't have those relationships at this point with those entities. And in fact, when we have engaged with some of these regulated entities, it has been pretty far down what I would call the hard power path, where we are really seeking to investigate and likely enforce our authority, which kind of leads to the third point. The way the bill is laid out would be I would say a significant lift for the AG's office, a significant resource demand of the AG's office. And at least in my initial read of the bill, I think a departure from our normal role. We don't provide a lot of direct regulation for the entities that we engage with in the consumer space. We do a lot of enforcement around it, and we usually do that enforcement based on consumer complaints or otherwise understanding unfair and deceptive practices within the marketplace, as opposed to enforcing regulation through a regulatory regime, as H11 would suggest, namely the kind of reporting response. I would also just say that we already have a lot of the authority that's laid out under especially section 2940E, page 5 of H11. That lays out prohibited practices. We support those prohibited practices, and generally speaking, we see a lot of those prohibited practices as falling under the broad umbrella of unfair and deceptive acts and practices that we already have the authority to enforce under the Consumer Protection Act. Beyond that, I would just say, and kind of circling back to the point of when we operate as a regulator, or the infrequency with which we do. An example would be the Agency of Natural Resources is obviously a regulator in the state. When they reach the stage of actual litigation enforcement, those cases come to the AG's office, and then we enforce them. Not a one-to-one analogy to this bill, but I would say that tends to be our role, is not regulating but enforcing regulation across the Let me pause there and see if there are questions or areas that I haven't responded to.
yeah,
Thank you. So what I'm hearing you say is this the Attorney General's office position is this would be better done by DPS.
We think it is a better fit at DPS.
And is there any reason that DPS could not do it? Are they preempted in any way from doing this?
I couldn't speak to, I think in my review of the bill, it was more of a policy review for the apt and fit for the AG's office. We can certainly provide more of a legal response, though I know you have able legislative counsel who's provided a lot of that. I would not be comfortable testifying that they are either preempted or not, and that the Department of Public Service is preempted or not under certain features of H11.
Okay.
Our main point is it is much more apt fit for the department that already engages with these regulated entities, that is really a change.
And so that would be a question for Maria, because
Okay.
it's like, and then 24.9J, which is enforcement, that seems like something investigations and enforcement.
What page you on?
That's on page 11. On page 11, line 18. That would be something with if we were to move forward and make other changes, that would be something that you would support. Is that current?
I would say we already have that authority. So in the instance where we have evidence that a commercial entity, a broadband provider, for the purposes of an example here, has engaged in what appear to be deceptive acts or practices in the marketplace. So they offer X service and then they're not performing on that, or it appears to be some kind of bait and switch. We already have the authority under the existing law to investigate them, to produce a civil investigative demand, and then to move forward if necessary with litigation penalties laid out in Chapter 63.
And I apologize. Do you know if the references there are for that existing?
2453, yes. So
So
that's on page 12. Yeah.
So this would be, it's just referencing your existing.
Yeah, it would be, in our view, this is a duplicative, and I wouldn't. There's some concern that when we further narrow how to apply the broad statute that is our Consumer Protection Act, we like the broad umbrella that it currently provides because it enables us to build cases without trying to fit them necessarily into specific buckets, very narrow buckets. That's not to suggest all these buckets are narrow.
Yeah.
And so we have some concern over a level of specificity that would seem to kind of cabin our authority, or at least require us to make alternative arguments.
And the narrowing is in on line 20 on page 11, where it's specifically saying broadband provider.
Well, it's really 2490E, the prohibited practices on page 5.
Okay,
And then this would be redundant of our existing authority.
so. Yeah. And which, I'm sorry. The whole thing, you're saying, yes.
Again, at a very high level, we think we have the authority to perform most of these, to argue that most of these practices, if found, would be deceptive and marketplace or unfair.
So creating a chapter that specifically says this is deceptive and unfair for broadband providers, which is what we're doing here. So this bill would create a specific for broadband providers, definition for broadband providers, and that is what you're saying is the narrowing that you
Could potentially constrain other enforcement efforts. Now, obviously, as I think the committee recognized yesterday or the day before, I don't remember, Chapter 63 has a host of subchapters that are very subject matter specific and that arise out of lots of different fact patterns. I think generally speaking in this area, again, without seeing what the types of complaints are broadly and the sort of volume and the need to respond, we believe that most of those concerns already would be caught up in an unfair, deceptive acts or practices statute, which we already have.
that's a chair.
Additional questions for the AG's office? Yeah.
Thank you. You've already answered it, but I just want to put it through again. The protections laid out in H11. It's the understanding of the AG's office that the consumer protections already exist.
Broadly speaking, yes.
Victoria.
And just to add, it also sounds like the current access point for consumers is already pretty well covered with the DPS
And the AGO, I'm going to be a little squirrely on that answer and say, based on what we see in the complaints we're receiving, we don't see high volume on this front, or we don't what we pass on to the Department of Public Service isn't coming back to get further resolution.
Okay,
What complaints do you get? Whether there's a broadband?
I can get them. It doesn't appear on our top 10 list. It doesn't appear, they're smaller than that, but if it helps the committee, I can at least ask what the sort of volume and type, to the extent that we have them, and don't just move them directly.
You know, as I've shared with you, one of the concerns that I have around this is that consumers don't actually know what is happening to them. It's kind of invisible. And so I would be curious if we could get that information about what the existing complaints are, just to understand what is driving Vermonters when they are paying to.
that'd be great.
Sounds like we should get that from DPS if they are handling the large
So
majority of those.
we could ask them as well. But when you're looking at a consumer complaint, it would go to you, Paul, right? At this point?
Well, that's up to the consumer. I mean, I think right, both CAP and CAPI, our project, and DPS's project, so much overlap in acronyms. Both have online portals and phone portals, and consumers are making the choices to who they call, and we attempt to not have a wrong door, but we don't do that. We try and filter them to the right entity, and for most of those broadband calls, they go to CAP.
And so I have a follow-up question.
Yeah.
So if there is an unfair business practice that is happening, you know, a complaint comes into the Department of Public Service, it's an unfair business practice. Do they have the ability to do something about that, or do they reach out to you?
They reach out to us. I mean, that's the regulator versus enforcer kind of division I was talking about.
I'm sorry, can you remind me again? What does CAP do and what does CAPI do? I need a CAPI.
I should just not use acronyms in that.
Recap.
Oh, no.
That was a good one.
It's a good Friday.
Recap, thank you.
So the Consumer Assistance Program is the Attorney General's Consumer Outreach and Response Program that is housed at UVM and is a co-AGO UVM project. So that handles all the consumer complaints that we receive. That could be anything from propane, online, the hearing aids. There is a whole host
Scams.
of all the
anything.
scams and frauds. Thank you. That's a huge part of it. Crypto, all of those things roll through CAP. I believe it is the Consumer Assistance Public Information Program.
Okay.
The Department of Public Service. Yeah, manages the consumer complaints around regulated entities that fall under the Department of Public Service.
So that would be
Like, right.
electric. Okay,
And telecom. And I think that's where the broadband, which, you know, as the bill, I don't know if it points out, but it clearly flags, is not regulated in the same way that those other two entities are. But again, to that soft relational piece, a lot of those entities are regulated as telecom, and therefore that's the right avenue. And that's why, I mean, not only are they a regulator, but they have those relationships with a lot of the providers already.
because what's interesting is we talk about trying to get a sense of the scope of the problem. For starters, we did ask Hunter Thompson from the director of telecoms and connectivity yesterday about the CAPI division and what sort of dashboard or reporting or public transparency they had around their complaints. And he did just email me and say that this morning, actually, and say that he was told that the department does not publish complaint details. So I haven't written him back yet, but I'm not sure whether that means they don't publish any kind of high level summary of complaints, or they don't publish. I can understand obviously why they wouldn't publish identifying information. So I think maybe we need to learn a little bit more about what kind of transparency there is in allowing the public and legislators and all kinds of folks to see what kind of complaints they're fielding and how they're being resolved. And yeah, Representative Howard.
In absence of this bill passing successfully, does this open, or is there open to rulemaking by the DPS? I guess that's the agency to strengthen the level of deception that they have, that the provider may be marketing?
I couldn't speak to the rulemaking authority of the Department of Public Service. I'm just candidly, I'm not familiar with their statute, but usually, right, there's a statutory authorization that provides an avenue to the Vermont Administrative Procedures Act to move forward with rulemaking. But it's so I can't quite answer what you're asking, but it would certainly rulemaking is another avenue.
Is there a level that comments come in that don't rise to the level of a complaint? And are they tracked or?
I can get details from our consumer assistance program. I think that's a question as the chair was flagging for the Department of Public Service to understand sort of what level of detail they can provide around and sort of what their thresholds are. But I'm happy to get whatever we have on broadband complaints from consumers.
It'd be great to see from CAP. Rep Torrey?
So my question's a little broader, just because you're the first person from your office to come in. I'm just curious if any of the areas under our jurisdiction, energy, telecom, do make the top 10.
I should have had that list with me. I mean, in the sense that scams often are perpetrated through telecom and digital infrastructure.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Energy?
There are definitely scams that run through false utility bills and those types of scenarios. But I'm more than happy to email.
Or
That
like
is on my
propane
desktop.
complaints, things like that.
Yeah. I'm just not remembering what the top 10 are, but we can definitely provide that. And I think usually March might be Consumer Protection Month, and we usually do a big push around what the scams and complaints are. But again, that I can, if it's helpful, we could bring somebody in from CAP to talk about it. There's not as much overlap here as there is in economic development.
Right.
Thank you.
Yep. On page 6, line 4. So this is violating privacy, security, or network management practices. It's something that is already covered. So how is privacy covered right now in the consumer protection?
Well,
Gotcha.
the phrasing of this particular prohibited practice is pretty broad. So I'm certain we could come up with scenarios where there was a promise made, representation in the marketplace made around privacy, security, or network management. That is not borne out. There are other areas where data breaches and the like could come into play. Those are regulated, and I think
Those are regulated.
data breaches have a measure of regulation. Yes. I would say to your broader point, we would love a much stronger data protection set of legislation that would continue to improve the safety and security of Vermonters, especially our children, but across the board, in what is largely an unprotected marketplace where our data is just out there with very little ability for consumers to really protect themselves. Again, the AG's office would argue we have that authority, but it's much, much harder for an individual consumer whose individual data is being sold without their knowledge to really do anything to prevent that or even find out if it's happening. And that's what we'd advocate for and will continue.
And there is a bill. This
Several.
Right.
The old H-120.
Yeah.
Not your new.
Sure, you'll be spending a lot of time in the Commerce Committee.
I forget what you just said. It was data breach. Breach. Laws.
So that's also in Title 9.
Mhm.
I believe it's a subsection of Chapter 63, but I won't. I meant to bring Title 9. Since I like to carry it around. We all. Anyway, it's
We
fine.
all have our favorite.
I like both Title IXs actually. Uh, so in response to that, I'm not expert enough to walk you through all the elements of the data breach notification and requirements. But our office gets notice of that, and we're working on engaging more with the Agency of Digital Services and other partners to improve our response to data breaches.
Yeah, you said we could go a little askew, so
Yeah.
it's adjacent to this, but on this topic.
No, yeah.
Okay, so I have been interested for many years in understanding, and I don't even know if I need to understand, but understanding what the notification process is around cyber breaches, and particularly to the legislature.
Mhm.
So, the speaker is in the line of, governing. And so at what point does she get notified, the pro tem? Is that something that I've asked that question of ADS unsuccessfully in the
Yeah.
past?
I would not be comfortable answering that until I haven't looked at the data breach statute in like maybe a decade. To dig through it.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to work at the AG's office. I took about a decade off. I came back about 6 months ago. So I haven't dug back into
Somebody's looked at it.
absolutely. And in fact, I think there are a lot of areas. I believe there's another bill pending that will beef up the data breach notice and some of the practices for data brokers. So I'm happy to come back to you directly on that, or if the chair wants, I can come back in to provide testimony on it. If that's something germane to another bill. We get notice depending on the scope and scale of the breach, and then we act accordingly depending on that. So for an example of that is there was a case a number of years ago around Blackbaud, which was a consumer product. And our office took the lead on investigating that data breach. They were very compliant, but had made a lot of big errors, and it ultimately was a nationwide action that resulted in pretty significant penalty or payment based on that. So that's how we operate when we get a data breach notice. But to your other point, we get some implication of it that I have to look into.
Thanks.
Yep. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you so much for being here. We will be back in touch should we require further elucidation.
And I will follow up with Jack on the cap information.
That would be great. And if you have a chance to just put a few thoughts in writing,
Absolutely.
that would be great.
Sure.
So that we have something to put on our website. Great.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Jack, let's stay live. Do folks have a little bit of time here can we just have a little work session on the budget? Okay, great. Jack, can you put on our, pop up on our agenda that at 11:30 we're discussing the FY26 budget?
Yep.
All right. Did folks get the memo from Rep Shy? I thought I had it printed out. Okay. Here. What I was hoping we could do is literally just flag the sections, just go through as a team and flag the sections that we need to look at. And Rep Southworth might be leading the charge.
Yeah, where's the best place to look at the budget?
Well, so yeah, I think we could. Jack, do you have you posted our budget materials yet on the website?
No matter pros. They don't like.
I don't know.
I'd go to the
Because the links are right in Robin's letter.
Yeah.
documents.
So,
Oh, I haven't posted anything.
okay, we need to get that,
If you still not
You can send it to me. I can do that right now.
okay, I sent it. Let me just. Second here.
This is good for us to practice finding.
Yep, no, this is good.
Added up this morning, I did find it.
Yeah, okay.
I need smaller last.
I would look, I'd go to the summary. I don't know if it's something.
Which one of these documents do you want to work through?
Well, I was gonna start from Robin's letter because the links it had in there
I looked there, but I.
led right to the two
Yeah.
documents.
So this gives you the number.
B 1100 B.
Yep.
There's B. So-
Okay, so if you don't see it in this table, it means it's not money, it's a language change. You need to find the language change in the
Okay,
other document.
Jack, I sent it, it went to the committee. Do you not get emails that come to the whole committee?
I do not.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Okay. Apologies. That is crazy. All right. So God, I wonder what else you're missing. That I just assumed you were getting. I can't believe they don't include committee assistants. All right, Jack, here it comes.
usually the speaker sent us the links to everything we need for the school.
Okay, so could you
Oh, budget look good.
help pull up? What should we pull up, Dara? Can you help Jack pull up the right thing?
It came right to us.
Yeah, from the.
We
Sure.
found it on the approach. Here, let me, do you have the link that you could just send to me?
Are you looking at this?
Those are the two documents, that one and the expertise spreadsheet.
I got it.
Okay, which one should we?
I'm gonna just, I think I can get the quickest through the email from just.
What day did we get that?
From Robin?
Yeah.
I
I
see.
didn't get
sent it.
anything from Rob.
No, it came from the chair.
It came from me
Yes.
yesterday
Yes.
at 3:25 PM.
Wonderful. Okay.
Okay. So our areas are.
Here we go.
All right, so Jack, I'm gonna send you. Which, Dara, you're ahead of me on this, and Mike is too. Which, should I have Jack pull up this or this on the screen?
Pull up the FY 2026 governor's recommended. I think it's one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the one on the left.
Yeah.
And then the numbers we want to look for,
B 1100B, which is on page. It starts on page 3. It just shows a highlight of it.
We're on the 2025.
no,
26.
2026, governor's recommend.
Three.
So I'm in,
I'm just looking
all right,
at 1100B
The chairs.
is page.
So where'd you find that doc there?
Um,
There.
Is this what we're looking for?
okay, keep that. That's one thing. The other one, Jack, in that letter. Phew.
The hyperlink in the letter.
Yep.
Yeah. The other hyperlink in the letter. Keep that tab, handy.
Summary is the little one. What's
Okay, look, finally making progress. Then the letter, okay,
Here, if you just find Cassie.
This is everything, right? This is just us.
And then you
Right,
open up
but-
this memo, it's got both.
and then the letter from Robin gives us our specific sections.
Yeah.
So we're gonna start in this document. Yes. Okay, we're getting there.
1100B.
1100B. So that is.
Sorry.
Page 3.
Is
Thank you.
Yeah. scroll down a
modernization
little more.
project.
Right
Okay.
there. So B 1100 starts right there, and it shows one time or other appropriation actions.
Yeah.
Just scroll down.
Yep,
Are those hyperlinked? If he has,
there, no.
oh,
Oh,
so
unfortunately.
yeah, see that, so you're almost to B. Just keep scrolling up. There's B. And you see it has money.
Revenue Human Resources, fiscal year 26, funds appropriated, 1.57 million, 575 million for the general fund for classification modernization. Which is DHR.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so we're on page 4. Is that what page you guys are on?
Yes.
for,
Governor's recommend.
This one. Right.
I have no idea what that is.
Are you ready? Okay, so open up it, open the attachment. And then scroll down, she's got both ones. So there's language and there's summary. You want language.
Thank you.
All right. 1100. Okay, so section B, 1100. One-time appropriations, we've got the Secretary of Administration asking for some money under A that does not have to do with us. And then B, the Department of Human Resources. In fiscal year 2026, funds are appropriated for the following: 1.575 million. $1,100. I don't know who is section 1100A. Is your question, Laura? Why is it 1100A us?
I'm just trying to think of who has,
Would it be GovOps?
it's the municipal technical.
1100A is GovOps.
Okay.
Okay, folks, believe it or not, we're making progress. So Department of Human Resources, fiscal year 2026, funds are appropriated for the following: 1.575 million general fund for the classification modernization project. So we need to find out about that.
DHR.
DHR.
Human Resources.
Okay. I'm wondering if we should have them in for some quick testimony. Do folks want to invite them in? Quickly hear about what that request is, or do you want to rely on our appropriations buddy and Scott to have them tell us? It doesn't seem like a big expenditure to me.
I would think our appropriations and Scott's very in tune to that. I think that would be, I don't think we need to involve the others. We have a good handle on what it is that's coming at us.
Okay, so let's find out from Scott. And
My opinion,
is it Harrison?
from approach.
Yeah. Where's our
Yes.
little Harrison? Okay, it's not Kazinska, that's
No.
one, right?
And there is no energy in the recommend, but that's,
Okay. Okay. Proceeding laboriously along. 101D. D101. Okay, so there's one. D101. Section C. And let's remember, these are all one-time appropriations. That's what we're looking at, right?
Yeah, be on page 17.
Okay. Of course, my page numbers are not showing, just to make it more fun. D101, okay.
So tax modernization, computer system modernization fund,
Okay.
4.3 million.
A1C. A1C, got it. Tax computer system modernization fund, $4.3 million. Okay,
So I would like to just kind of question that, because didn't the tax department just go through modernization a couple of years ago? Maybe you.
So what do they mean by fund here? Is this putting money aside or is this actually,
Which is something we had talked about too.
right?
Mhm.
Yes.
I mean, it's from the general fund to the tax computer modernization fund.
okay. So we have questions about that one. I flagged that.
And the next one would be the same flag because it's state IT fund.
Okay, and that's 101A1F. Information Technology Fund, 15 million.
And
That's
these-
Okay,
gonna be-
that's the
these are from The
ADS,
general fund.
huh?
So the general fund is their origin of this
Mhm.
transfer.
Right.
Okay,
That's gonna change when we get to the next.
okay. I see. Okay, right. Let me highlight that from the general fund. So this is okay, so these are one-time transfers from the general fund
Print this out.
Mhm.
to, and then these
Same.
two specific funds.
Who got this? She wants one.
One, and
Okay.
one, and there's no C, it goes from A to J.
So are you in the different? Sorry, let me just look at the name of this.
Okay,
Read it.
next is D101A3. Oh, again, okay, from the education fund
Right.
Right.
to the tax computer system modernization fund, 1.5 million.
Oh, my blood pressure just started to rise.
So I'm
He's got
not,
it. But
I'm not sure if that's not statutory.
Okay,
Okay,
I can't see the words.
I could be wrong, but I'm not sure it isn't.
I see my.
it's one, but these are one times, right?
yeah, these are all one-time, I assume one-time fund transfers, but maybe Mike just said if it's statutory, that would imply to me that he's wondering if it's an annual statutory transfer or something. I don't know, but I don't remember 1.5 million coming every year out of the ed fund.
No, and we just, yeah, I'm very interested in hearing more about
That one?
all of these IT projects that are in the budget, really honestly. So
Okay.
it would be great for Secretary Riley Hughes even
Yeah.
to
Yep.
give us a high level, including the first one.
So D101A3. Okay,
K, three.
uh-huh. It's
From
a
the
transfer from the ed fund.
The tax computer system modernization fund, which is already getting 4.3 up above.
In
Right.
addition
It's
to,
going to the same fund.
right, so so it's a sum of the two.
It's in addition.
Yeah, so it's getting 5.8 from two different sources.
Right.
I don't know what these numbers refer to.
They don't.
You mean the 9109, right?
I don't.
That's in parentheses.
Yeah, what is that?
Bet you it has to do with like
It's the
full
same
rampers thing,
Yeah,
but we just,
so here's the good news, folks. That's it for us.
Yeah. But isn't our job also to see what's missing that we would like to see?
Yes.
That's what's
So-
gonna go in the memo.
Yes, so, well, the memo, we have to weigh in on each of these things. And sometimes it's as short as we learned about the $5.8 million total transfer to the tax computer system modernization fund, and we support this decision.
So the,
You know,
the
but we
only,
need to learn about it.
the correlation I can make from the transfer from education to the tax would be funding education. And they're trying to update the tax computers or have it available to do something to update that as stuff progresses.
Right,
Yeah.
That's the only correlation I can make.
okay,
It's a good question.
okay,
mhm.
so, okay, so here is our assignment. So specifically, Approach has asked us to look at these items that we just flagged, so that was very helpful. I now have them highlighted. Then, so I'll do two things. One is I'll write to Rep Campbell and Rep Harrison and say, we've looked over our specific assigned sections of the budget. We see these four things. We don't understand them. We want to talk about them. And did we invite Jim to come in next week? Oh, that's during our budget discussion.
I have not sent that email yet.
Okay, let's make sure we definitely need to get Harrison up here.
Yep.
And we also have Secretary Riley Hughes coming in, who probably knows all about this. She's also going to be specifically prepared to talk to us about the $15 million one-time transfer, because that's a big deal.
For the state IT fund.
Yeah,
Okay.
and she's got a whole it's this whole thing she's doing about how, remember on the Budget Adjustment Act, all these agencies were getting kind of billbacks from ADS, and we were seeing all these billbacks. My understanding is that she is trying to resolve that problem and switch the way they bill and charge. And this is part of that, and I am gonna say no more because she should explain it and I will bungle it. So
Yes.
she's gonna come in and make a presentation to us. But it's related to that whole billback thing about how some agencies really aren't that great, at estimating
Right.
their EDS time and charges.
So one of the things too, I want to just bring out is we've talked about how IT projects are funded statewide.
Right.
And we had talked about where does that money come from? So it may be a good opportunity for us to talk about who is best suited to quote unquote hold a fund for these known upcoming upgrades.
Projects.
And that may be a real good scenario for us to talk about.
Okay,
And see if that melds with what we're thinking as far as having that central location that is the keeper of the fund, so to speak, that oversees these projects instead of having them just, each department is putting in their own, have one central that does the bidding, the procurement, all of that.
also JFO is getting ready to come talk to us about this as well also.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a document from 2021 from the working group of the legislature called IT Modernization Special Fund. The purpose is the state is committed to implementing long-term IT modernization fund to provide mechanisms, staffing, and financing necessary to achieve the important goal of modernizing the state of Vermont's IT infrastructure. No, it's a 4-page document. It doesn't look like it ever. New IT projects, cybersecurity, data analysis, upgrades to existing technology platforms and systems. Sounds exactly what we were trying to
So it exists.
address. Looks like a
Working group exists.
it's got, well, it did exist. It's got all kinds of numbers in here.
Oh, sorry, it's a working group.
Yeah, so we should
Can you
find
send
out
everybody that link?
what happened to this. Whether anyone followed up on this, it got created or not.
Okay,
Because it looks like exactly what we were discussing.
Chris or Rep Morrow, if you could send everybody that link, that'd be great. Okay, so I'm gonna write to Scott and Jim and say, here are the things that are on our radar. We need you two to explain these things to us, but most importantly, we have Secretary Riley Hughes coming in on Wednesday to talk about the ADS bill, and she knows that we're gonna have questions about the budget, and I will write to her and specifically say, in addition to the $15 million, can you please explain to us this, and that? So people will be prepared. Then, yeah,
Well, I don't want to interrupt your train of thought. Finish your.
okay, and then I was only gonna say, then we should all scan through all of these documents and just give it a read and see if anything jumps out. We can't muck around in areas that aren't our assigned things, but we should at least just skim through, see if there's anything that leaps out. And then we also do have the ability in our memo to either recommend or comment on anything else that we've been taking testimony on that's kind of on our radar. And so that could be the place where, as a committee, we could say, we're very interested in the $3 million that DOC is trying to get for Wi-Fi. And, excuse me. And then I guess it'll be up to the committee to say, we really hope you can find this money in the general fund, or if we're not agreed on that, we could say something more tepid or neutral, like we are, we can say something legislative, like we'd like to continue this conversation. So does that sound good?
And I'm just going to add that don't we also have to comment on or give a heads up on any bills that we think are gonna be a
Have money.
priority and have money? Like, do we want to give them a preview?
Yeah, so in our.
I don't know if we're there yet.
Well, in our chairs meetings every week, the money committees ask every chair, are you sending any bills our way that either have a tax or a fee or an appropriation? And so far, we don't have anything that has money in it. So
Nothing on the wall has money.
nothing that we're trying to vote. They want to know what we're actually voting out and sending to them, not anything.
Well, I guess
that-
that's my point. Like, we only have this small amount of time.
Right.
So what, if there is something on the wall that we haven't gotten to yet, but that we, or that's coming, like, how do we pivot in time with this
We got a
deadline?
bunch of new ones, right?
Yeah.
Today we got
So
they were short.
we don't pivot on time.
We won't be able to.
No.
Okay. That's, I guess, where I was going.
Yeah,
Just
that's
wanted to
my,
get that.
that's my blunt assessment. Like
Okay.
the bills that we have the bills that right now we're taking a bunch of testimony on that would have any hope of making crossover would be H11, which I think is a very big bill.
H16, did I hear you say H16?
H11, which is a very big bill that I don't see us getting out before crossover. H11 is I don't want to speak for Sibilia. H11 is a project. We've been taking testimony on H121. Which, we'll see what the testimony shows, whether we want to vote that out of committee or not, or keep working on it this year. That doesn't have any money in it, though.
Was there any money kind of alluded to in the telecom plan hearing yesterday? Did anybody pick up on anything?
Yes,
I feel like I did, but I didn't write it down.
I did.
And
I did write it
can't
down.
Remember what it was.
It was, and honestly, I thought, I'm not
Well,
sure we have time to deal with
Wasn't
this.
that the short tower?
Yes, it was a $2.5 to $3 million pilot project.
Yeah.
To pilot short mobile wireless
That's it.
Towers.
towers
Okay.
that wouldn't interfere with the landscape, that would go moving around. And I put it on a sticky note, which I then filed away for future.
For future. Okay.
Well, that would be a good thing to,
It'd be a great thing to learn about. I'm not
I
sure.
mean, this isn't like new technology. It's just a smaller tower. I mean,
Right.
and we need them.
Yeah.
Shorter towers more frequently, and then taller towers. Covering like a city radio station out to the boonies, and then the smaller towers for your little high school.
So
Yeah, I would be adamantly opposed to moving money towards cell without moving consumer protection.
well, I would also say
They're
that
not,
what we're hearing repeatedly in chairs from the appropriations committee is this money better feel important. This is a tight budget year, especially when we don't know what federal funding we might be losing. So honestly, in my mind, I filed it away for future consideration, not a right now thing. And then H125, I think the big question there is, and we're taking a lot of testimony on it next week. And if we like that bill and we're going to vote it out right now, it doesn't have any money in it.
Yeah.
But it could.
Yeah.
From my point of view, any bill that we have on that wall that requires somebody to do something and provide something, there is a monetary value attached to that, and I want to be very mindful and careful of that.
I don't argue that at all.
That's something I've been learning.
Yeah, for the purposes of house logistics, what they mean is,
I know, there's
yeah,
not an ask.
it carries an appropriation.
Correct.
So if we could, this is a great conversation, but I actually have to go sing happy birthday to Chair Emmons right now. So could we go off live, please? The State House Singers are gonna
Go off.
surprise her outside her committee room.